when you're ready.
Greetings. I'm Sister Cleo, and I'm so happy to share this information with you. Even if you have already heard about Black Wall Street, you just might learn something new by following our podcast, which we're hoping will serve as a resource linking you to our history. The topics we'll cover include the Oklahoma Land Rush, the founding of the Greenwood community, the Red Summer, the Black Wall Street Massacre, and what happened afterwards. Please feel free to make any comments you feel are necessary. That's it.
Good evening. My name is Sister Maddie, and I am your co-host. One day, Sister Cleo and I were talking about the state of Black folk today. During our conversation, we discovered several things. We discovered that we both love learning and we both love research. And somewhere in this conversation, we appointed ourselves as a council with the responsibility to share what we learn. Our council objective is to ensure that our young folk, our warriors of today and tomorrow, step out to protest and speak up, and that they do so with a strong foundational background into their majestic roots. And yes, our roots are majestic. We want to ensure that young and old dig deep into the spirit of our ancestors and their hard-fought achievements to find the greatness that lies within us all. Our podcast will be a series of segments on different topics that have shaped the Black experience in America. Tonight, we start the Black Wall Street series. Now, we all know slavery ended in 1865, and almost immediately, many Black folks prospered, actually becoming wealthy. We know that we heard stories about poor Black sharecroppers struggling in the South, and those are true stories, but there is so much more to that segment of our history. Tonight, we want to introduce another of the many paths taken by Black African Americans. After being declared a free people by Lincoln's signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, many of these people chose to leave the master's plantations. In this series, we introduce things like land rush and homesteading. These are two very important elements in expanding our country westward and Black wealth. I'm going to give you two definitions, one for land rush and one for homesteading. Now, a land rush, that's like Black Friday. So, you know, in Black Friday, they tell you at 7 p.m., we're going to open the doors and we have doorbuster deals and come in and get the great deals. The land rush is very similar. At a time, a predetermined time, you know that you want to line up and they have parcels of land. They've divided this land into 160 acres, millions of acres of land. And so what you have to do is when they sound the time to start, which was by cannon, they shoot off a cannon, you take off running. They had people on horseback, carriages, and people running. They had people that, of course, cheated and hid in the woods so they could get an early start. And we'll talk about that sometime later. But the objective was to get your parcel of land and claim it. Now, once you claim this land, that's when homesteading came in. And homesteading was that the government gave you that parcel of land that you claimed, and you got it for just almost like a service fee, a very small fee. And there were rules when you got this land, and you had to follow those rules. At the end of your term, because there was a set amount of time, at the end of your term, you paid another small fee, 160 acres was yours. Now, excuse me, our first significant Homestead Act was passed in May of 1862, May 20th of 1862. And of course, most Blacks, not all Blacks, most Blacks were still living under slavery. This Homestead Act accelerated people in the United States, which were mostly settled on the East Coast, moving west and taming the Wild Wild West. The Homestead Act of 1862 opened millions of acres of land. And again, as I said before, it was parceled off into 160 acres each. Adult head of households got to purchase the land. They had to live on it for 5 years, and they had to improve the land. Any adult who had never taken up arms against the federal government could apply. Women were also eligible to apply, and immigrants were eligible to apply or to, to get the land. But in order, if you were an immigrant, you had to be actually applying for citizenship to be eligible to keep it after your 5-year time. In 1866, which would be after slavery, the Homestead Act implicitly included Black Americans, explicitly included Black Americans, and it encouraged them to participate in the homesteading and land rush process. But of course, 1866, there was rampant discrimination. There were all kinds of barriers and bureaucracy that kept Black people from getting land, or it made it a really, really slow process. A historian, Michael Lanza, argues that while the 1866 law allowing Blacks to homestead was not beneficial, and not as beneficial as it could have been, it was one of the reasons that by 1900, 1/4 of all Southern Black farmers owned their own land. The land rush did several things, and one of them, besides giving people land and besides taming the Wild West, it took land away from the Native Americans. The land rush ultimately led to establishing the Oklahoma Territory, because the majority of the 7 land rushes were in Oklahoma. The Oklahoma Territory later became Oklahoma, the 46th state of this United States.
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little about the Dawes Act of 1887 that was passed by, can you still see me?
Yes.
That was passed by Congress. It's also known as the General Allotment Act, and it allows the president to break up reservation land. Now, the purpose of this act and subsequent acts was to protect Indian property rights, particularly during the land rushes of the 1890s. But in many instances, the results were different. Mind you, this was already their land. In addition, the techniques of self-sufficient farming were much different from what the Native Americans were used to. The federal Indian policy during the period from 1870 to 1900 marked a departure from earlier policies where we would remove Indians, where we had treaties that we didn't keep with Indians, where we placed Indians on reservations, and where we actually fought Indians. Now, this new policy, the Dawes Act, that's D-A-W-E-S, focused specifically on breaking up reservations by granting land allotments to individual Native Americans, not tribes, but to individuals. And this was a way to break up tribal structure by suddenly making you an individual landowner. And the goal of that was to destroy the tribes, divide up their land, make them farmers. make them think of themselves less of a tribe and more as an independent farmer. Indians did not want to farm, and those who did could not afford to farm because they couldn't afford the tools, the animals, the seed, and other supplies necessary to get started. And the Indians were forced to abandon their culture. Many of the tribes were able to obtain ownership of land, but not until they lived on it for 25 years. And whites tried to promote ideas of assimilation. The tribes lost authority over their land. Now, before the Dawes Act, 150 million acres remained in Indian hands. But within 20 years, 2/3 of their land was gone. Indian culture was gone. Indians were trying to become westernized. I mean, whites even built Christian churches on reservations. There were certain groups exempt from the Dawes Act. And those groups, it was the Cherokee, Creeks, the Choctaws, the Chickasaws, Seminoles, Osage, Miamis, Peorias, Sacs, and Foxes, the Seneca Nation of New York Indians, and the Sioux Nation. They were all exempt from this law. But pretty soon, due to a lot of conflicts, they succumbed. Now, the Dawes Roll specifically mentioned, well, it applied to what was called the 5 civilized tribes. And those tribes were the Cherokee, the Creeks, the Choctaws, the Chickasaws, and the Seminoles. And that went into effect around 1893. And President Grover Cleveland appointed the Dawes Commission to negotiate with these so-called civilized tribes. I guess the other tribes weren't civilized. Several acts were passed after that time, and it allotted a share of common property to members of these 5 civilized tribes in exchange for abolishing their tribal governments and recognizing federal and state laws. In order to receive the allotted land, members had to enroll with the Office of Indian Affairs, which is now called the Bureau of Indian Affairs, where their names would go on the Dawes Roll, which helped to determine eligibility of individual members for land distribution. Mind you, their land that the U.S. is distributing. I'm done.
Sister Cleo, you said what I was thinking too. Their land. We come to their country, take their land, give it back to them the way we want to give it to them in the form of reservations, then take that and then give them parcels of land, because that's how we can break up the reservations. Man, I don't even know what to, you You all,
When we did give them parcels of land to farm,
yes,
but it was unusable land.
yes. So it's not usable, one. Two, they don't want to be farmers. Three, they can't be farmers because they can't afford the equipment to be farmers because that's not what they were. Indians were hunter gatherers. And so now they've just totally, and I guess, is that how you assimilate a people? That's forced assimilation.
It's forced, and to me, it's a design to get rid of them.
Mm-hmm. It's
To kill their spirit. I mean, you don't give them any
yeah.
work that they want to do or that they can do or that they have the equipment to do it with.
Or that traditionally they've done.
Yeah.
Because like I said, they were hunters. You know, to tell them, you know, take a tool and start farming. I don't even understand. And then you said the civilized tribes. What was the criteria for being labeled as civilized and uncivilized? That's interesting. So that's, you know, we'll find, and I'm not asking you, I'm just saying, oh my God, how do you come as a barbarian and decide to label somebody civilized or not?
Right.
That's what we had, barbarians.
Uh-huh.
People civilized.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
But this is something that happened in our history, and again, it leads us to Black Wall Street, which is why we started with the Indians and the land and how the land was divided up, because we want to know that. Cleo, you mentioned our upcoming topics. Okay, and I know we said Black Wall Street, and I'm just bringing it around, bringing it home.
Yeah, it's hold on. All of that.
Okay, so and while you're looking for that, I just thought about Black people and assimilation. So we need to know: do we need assimilation? Do we need integration? Do we need separation? What is it? What is it we need? Separation, segregation, integration, or assimilation? So I think that would be something that should be a lively discussion among a bunch of folks. So I think we should put that on there for sometime later, because we want this to keep on going forever and ever and ever, and then we'd be able to talk and hopefully not just talk, but to do some things to make our situation better, to make our kids' situation better.
I think those topics you just mentioned would be good for, you know, our audience to look up and see what they can find and share their information with us next time.
Because that's a big one, because everybody thinks we should integrate, but should we? Do we want to? What do we get when we integrate?
That's true.
Yeah. What do we get when we separate and get our own?
So some of the other topics under this subject that we plan to discuss is the Oklahoma land rush, how the Greenwood community was founded, what is Red Summer, what was Red Summer, the Black Wall Street massacre, what happened to the founders after that, and what happened to Black Wall Street after that. So these are the topics that we'll be discussing on this subject.
Okay, and that's pretty good, because we are coming up to the 100-year anniversary of the Wall Street Greenwood massacre. So we do want to make sure people know what it is, because you'll start seeing more and more about it as we get closer and closer to May when it actually happened. So this is a big event, and I know they're planning a big pilgrimage to Greenwood. And so we want to provide information on that pilgrimage too, so that we can all take part in that. Again, we need to get into our history so that we have foundational information on us as a people, not just we were slaves over in Africa, or should I say free people over in Africa, but running around like savages, and we came over here and we were slaves. And then, you know, bam, it's 2020. No, we have a history.
We have a wonderful history. And I think this would also show that we weren't just subservient people. You know, we were fighters, we were warriors,
Mm-hmm.
but we were overwhelmed
Mm-hmm.
and we were tricked. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe we were basically a little too trusting
Mm-hmm.
even before we came to this country.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's going to be interesting, and it's a learning experience for me, and I am enjoying every minute of it.
Me too, Sister Cleo, because I love to learn, and you don't know what you don't know until you start looking.
Mm-hmm.
So we hope everybody will join, and you know, we can all help each other be better. Each one teach one.
That's right. That's right.
We thank you for joining us.
And we look forward to seeing you next time.